So when you say he wished it on you, how did he wish it on you?
Well, he always hoped that I could do it. It was a thing. I mean, the man was a genius, but the one thing he couldn't do was stand up in public and talk, and he always hoped that I would be able to.
When you say he was a genius, what sort of evidence did he give for that?
Well, as I've said already, the way he could add up, his mathematical genius was terrific, and he was an extremely clever man in many ways, and he was also extremely musical. It's when he was younger, he belonged to a club in Loughborough Junction, and they used to challenge him. They used to find all sorts of weird instruments and bring them into the club and challenge him to get a tune out of them, which he always did. He could play anything, and he was extremely good at it.
And didn't you tell me that he used to go and see these films or whatever, and he'd see a song hear a song in the film, then come back to the club and play it on the piano?
Oh yes, he could do that. He was very talented with the music. Yeah.
So sorry. What did he do?
Well, if you went to the pictures in those days, they used to, before you went in, tried to sell you a record of the, what do you call a record today? A CD of the music in the film. But he didn't need to, because if he went to the film and heard it, he could come back to his club and play it for them on the piano. It was in his head.
I may be wrong, but I think in the 20s they didn't sell very many records. They mostly sold sheet music.
Yes, there was an awful lot of sheet music sold, yeah.
So would they have sold him a record, or would they have sold him sheet music?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can only remember the time when there used to be records, but perhaps, as you say, before that it was sheet music, so that's probably what it was.
So he could sort of cheat. He could sort of cheat. He could just go and pick it up and automatically play it.
Yeah. And of course you've got to remember there was a lot of music halls then. So you could go to a music hall and someone would be singing or playing something live. And he could memorise it and go away and play it.
The impression one has of the music hall is that they used to keep singing the same old songs time after time after time, for years after year. So it wouldn't be very difficult to actually know.
Yeah, well, some songs were favourites. Various music hall people had a song that was their song, but you went to the music hall, you were in there several hours. There had to be an awful lot of songs and things and dancing and all the rest of it. It wasn't all the old favourites. Had to be some new stuff all the time.
And how do you think your father learnt to play the piano?
I think he just could. I think he just tried it, and he was able to pick it up and play it, because he could play any instrument.
But your grandmother wasn't a piano teacher or anything like that?
I think I'd never met. I probably did, but I can't remember my grandmother. But yes, I think she was musical.
And she might have taught him?
Possibly, yeah.
But you don't know?
No.
But you did meet your grandfather, didn't you?
Yes, I knew my grandfather well.
What was he like?
He was a very nice man. He was the president of his union, and extremely highly principled chap, but he became so fat that he could hardly move. So they used to all have to come to him, because he went to a meeting once, a long time ago, and he sat on a chair on the stage and the bloody chair collapsed. So he would never go to a meeting again, because he thought it made him look extremely foolish.
And why do you think sorry, would you hang on a minute? Just do some housekeeping. Right. Why do you think your grandfather was fat?
Drinking.
What did he drink?
Guinness, I think.
Guinness? That was quite rare in London in those days, wasn't it?
I don't know. What do I know about it? It was before I was born and when I was a small child. But I think the whole family were boozers. You see, they spent their recreational time in a club rather than sitting at home. No wireless, no television in those days. So they used to go out to a club. There was a piano, and Dad used to play the piano, and everyone used to have a jolly up. And of course, if all the time he was playing the piano, people would keep putting pints on the side of it. So he used to get quite a few, and I think my grandfather was the centre because it was all people with the same union, mainly in clubs in those days, and their families. And of course he was the president, and he was a very popular man. I dare say he got bought a lot of beer.
So these were sort of working men's clubs, were they?
Yeah.
And this was the working men's club in Loughborough Junction?
I think it was called the Liberal Club, but I'm not sure.
Absolutely, yes. Liberal clubs, quite a few of them escaped when the Liberal Party ceased to be a mass membership organisation.
Yeah.
So it could well have been taken over by
the working men.
And what did your grandfather do for a living?
He was a printer.
What sort of printer was he?
I don't know. He was.
He was a compositor.
Was he? I don't know.
And did he ever tell you anything about his job?
No, not really. He worked for the stationery office, and a lot of it was top secret.
Didn't he say something about all these rules that he had for spelling things?
Oh, he used to lecture me about spelling because I couldn't, and that was a disaster as far as he was concerned. And he had a reason why everything was spelt the way it was, a sort of a rule, yeah. But I can't remember what they were.
And do you remember him before he retired?
I don't know. I used to go, and I mean, it was a sort of a duty thing. Even after my father died, my mother used to take me to Loughborough Junction to see my grandfather. It was and I can remember going to see him. I think I can remember when my father was alive because I can remember vaguely going to the club with them.
Can you remember Uncle Jack?
Not really. I sort of a big bluff sort of a man is my what I feel, you know.
Well, I think one time you told me that his father was your grandfather was astonished that such a big military man could have sort of died of a sort of chill or a cold or something like that, didn't he?
Yes, he got the flu, I think. It was quite amazing.
But this wasn't in the flu pandemic, was it? It was a long time after that.
I think so. It was about the same time as my father.
Yes.
It's only about a year between them.
I think there was 18 months between the two of them.
Was
wasn't
it? You could be right.
But didn't your grandfather have sort of two sons who died in 18 months?
Yes, I think that's right, yeah. And his daughters lived on.
Yeah. Your mum was not so fond of his daughters.
No, she thought they were common. I think they were just Londoners.
Yeah. And she didn't come from London.
No, she came from Norfolk.
And what was her background then?
a small village called Banham. My grandfather worked in the brickfields until he got a rupture, and then God knows what, they lived on the parish, I think. But by that time there was, I think, nine girls and a boy, something like that. And the older girls were out to work in service by then, and they used to bring money home to sustain the rest of them.
And did you ever go down to Banham?
Oh yes, every year we used to have a holiday in Banham, even when I was a little boy, when my father was alive.
And what was it like in Banham?
I liked it. It was very different from here. It was such a little market. Well, it wasn't even a market town, I don't think, but a little teeny town, you know, village, I suppose you might call it. Hardly anything of it. The only thing that ran up the roads was dogs. There was, of course, in those days there were no cars. There was. We used to get off the train in Eccles and get a chap would take us in a horse and buggy, bring us back to Norwich, Banham.
And you got off the train in Eccles?
Yeah,
What was Eccles?
I don't know. It just seemed to be a stop for the train.
Uh-huh. And so the train would sort of go to Norwich or somewhere like that?
Norwich, yeah. It was the LNER, London to Norwich.
And then at Norwich got a small feeder line to Eccles?
No, it passed through Eccles on the way to Norwich.
Oh, I see. And so you got off at Eccles?
Yeah.
And then you got a small
Horse and buggy, yeah.
Yeah, that must have cost a few pennies to get a horse and buggy all the way to Banham?
I suppose so, but I mean, it was when my father was in work. Later on, there was a coach. Once the coach started running, the coach ran to Banham.
And were there any of the other sisters still living at home in those days?
No, not when we first used to go down there.
Didn't Mabel live at home then?
Mabel came home eventually, but in those days Mabel was in service with a judge, Judge Ingleback. I remember that name well. In Dulwich.
And she came to a bit of a sticky pass at one stage, didn't she?
Well, I don't know. I can only guess because I wasn't allowed to know things like that.
And the thing that you guess is?
I guess that there was an illegitimate child.
Yeah, but the child died, didn't it?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Well, or maybe it was went to an orphanage. And
yeah, it could have been adopted or something. I don't know. It was all something that was talked to in hushed whispers if I was about, you know. I wasn't allowed to know anything sordid like that.
And what was the cottage like?
The cottage was had one room downstairs with a large pantry which went in jutted off from it, and if you went out of the back door, turned right and right again, you were in what they called the shed, and the shed was I'm trying to make it architectural, backed up to where the pantry wall, so it was quite big, and in the shed was a copper and a stove, both of which were fired by wood burners. And my grandmother had two little oil stoves that she used to use frying pan or the kettle, and that was about it.
Now these days we would think of a copper as a policeman. What do you think of as a copper?
A copper is a boiler to boil your clothes in. I think that it was called a copper because Lots of them were made of copper, but this was a brick built one.
And it's just a little wood-fired stove that heats up water.
Yes, and when the water, and you boil the water and boil the clothes in it.
And how on earth did they get the wood? Because Banham wasn't in the middle of a forest, was it?
No, I think they used to get solder wood, I think, but I can't remember, to be absolutely honest. But they obviously didn't go around chopping down trees, so they must have been solder wood somewhere.
Well, have men come round to sell them things like fish and... you know.
Yes, yeah, there were people that came round. There was one chap had a tricycle with a box on the front, and he used to sell clothes. I don't think he sold clothes, but he sold material, and he used to shout out, "Any length you like, any length you like," and you knew he was outside waiting for you.
And did they go out and buy a lot of material to make dresses out of?
Yes, it's how they made what happened to how they got their clothes.
Yeah. So it was all handmade clothes until... When do you think they would have started buying clothes in shops?
I should think when they went to London.
So your mum wouldn't have made her own clothes?
Not once she got to London, no, I don't think so. She probably had to make them when she was in Banham, because I don't remember there being any shops in Banham that sold clothes, even in my day.
And did she make clothes for you?
I don't know. I really don't know. But you've got to remember that it was so different then. The people who lived in Banham hadn't been to the next village in the whole of their life, most of them, because the only way they'd get there was walk. So it was a very isolated kind of communities. They didn't trot down to Norwich to do some shopping or anything.
But your great-grandfather, I don't know when he died and whether you can remember him or not, he used to live in a village sort of 5 miles away, and he used to cycle.
Yeah.
Do you remember him at all?
No, I don't remember him, but he was a very... I remember that he was held in great respect.
Well, your mum certainly had a great deal of respect for him. She always said he was a very clever man.
Yeah.
Which to me suggested that he probably gave the family some money.
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
Well, as you said, there wasn't any obvious source of income once he was not able to work in the brick fields.
No. Well, I think they got money off the parish. The parish, no, I don't know where the parish got money from, but the expression "you lived on the parish" was in those days.
Yeah, they called it outdoor relief, Dad.
Didn't they?
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't have thought that they were poor enough for that.
I don't know. Didn't have any money.
No, but did anybody have any money in those days, Dad?
Well, you had to go out and buy some bloody food. Well, they didn't have to buy everything because they grew a lot in the garden. But even then, you got to buy the seeds and seed potatoes and things, haven't you?
Well, they did do some work because, for example, your mum talked about gleaning in the fields. So all the kids would have the day off school, so they could do gleaning. In the
Yeah.
They must have earned some money for that.
I don't think they earned money. I think they took the gleanings home and used them.
Sorry, I would have thought they used the gleanings for some kind of agricultural process.
No. The gleanings, just up the road was a mill. And if you took your gleanings to the mill, he'd mill them for you and keep a percentage. And the rest of it, that was your flour.
And what was it, a cooperative mill, or was it something that somebody owned, do you think?
Somebody owned it.
And, I mean, the gleanings were very poor quality. You have to do a lot of work to get anything out of them.
Well, I don't see why they would be poor quality. It was only the wheat or the barley or whatever that hadn't been picked up. It was just the same as all the rest, except it was lying on the ground.
Or was it? I got the impression that the sort of men who harvested the fields took out all the good stuff, and the gleaning was just any old rubbish that they couldn't be bothered to take.
No, it was a very crude business. I mean, you'd got a horse pulling a cutter, which cut the wheat down. Then you'd got blokes coming behind, picking it up and tying it into bundles, and what they called stooking it, standing the bales of wheat up, leaning them against each other, and letting the straw dry out a day or two. And then it would all be picked up by another horse and cart and taken to the mill. But there wasn't, they didn't go raking up the bits that they hadn't collected. You know, there was stuff on the floor, on the ground.
But you didn't see these horses in the streets. You said you only saw the dogs.
Yeah, horses didn't walk about the streets. Horses were either in the stables or out in the fields working.
So nobody had any horse transport. Nobody had.
Oh yes, the squire had horse and buggy, but and I suppose people like the baker must have had horse and cart to get round the village.
Well, I know somebody who was a milkman, not then, but in like the 1939 or something like that, and he had a hand cart. They wouldn't give him a.
Yeah, I remember the horse and carts when I was a boy in London. United Dairies and the Co-op had horse and carts.
But what I'm saying is,
but they, excuse me, but they had bottles. In Norfolk, what he did was he came round. I think it was it was like a little buggy, and he had a couple of churns on it, with ladles in the top, and you took your jug out and said you wanted a pint, and he dipped it in and poured it into your jug.
And this cart, could it have been a hand cart that he pulled along himself?
I don't think so, no. I think he had a pony or something like that.
So you saw the odd pony about?
Yeah.
But there would have been no coal merchants if everybody was burning wood. The coal merchants needed big horses.
Yeah. No, I don't remember coal at all in Norfolk. I mean, in London there was coal, horse and carts.
Well, they did have coal, Dad, because somebody talked to me about coal coming in at that station that you were talking about, Eccles.
Yeah.
But I don't think it got as far as Banham.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was, you see, once I was born, we only went down there in the summer. So in the summer, you wouldn't be using a lot of coal, would you?
Well, you might use it if you had a coal burning stove. You might use it for your cooking.
Yes, that's true. But then, you see, again, I wouldn't have known, because you wouldn't, during the week, they would use the little oil stoves for just a bit of boiling up potatoes and frying and things like that. And it would only be, she made her own bread. When she baked her bread, she'd bake it in the big oven, and once a week or whatever it was, when she did the washing, it would be done in a copper. But it wouldn't be a regular, everyday thing.
I thought you said they were wood stoves, not oil stoves.
No, the copper and the oven were wood stoves, but she had two little oil stoves which were about that big, like which had paraffin oil in them, and a little flame for. Yes, I had two small oil stoves about that size.
Sorry, the dog's got asthma. Right, okay. Oil stoves.
Yes, about that big, and on those they did the frying and the boiling the kettles and things of that nature, and the week's wash would be done in what we called a copper. It was an old boiler which was, the water was heated with wood, and the when she made her bread, she did a big old oven that was heated by wood.
Right. So could we do that again, Dad? Go back to the oil stir. Oh, sorry. Right. Okay. What were the oil stirs like, Dad?
They were about that big, quite small oil stoves, but they were used for the frying and the boiling of kettles and things like that.
Right. Okay.
My grandmother, a little bustly lady who I really, really thought the world of. She was a wonderful little woman, and I remember her very well. She used to make a fuss of me. She used to make a lot of wine. She'd make wine out of anything. She'd go along the hedgerow and pick things and come back and turn them into wine. And when I was a little boy, she used to let me have a glass of wine. And my mother used to say, "You shouldn't give that to him, you know." And she'd say, "It's got water in it, it's all right." And she'd turn to me and say, "No, it hasn't." I really loved her. She was a lovely lady.
And what sort of wine did she make? Sort of rosehip wine?
Rosehip, sloes, rhubarb, potato, everything you can think of.
Rhubarb wine's quite difficult to make because it's really acidic.
She had a long garden, and at the top of the garden was the lavatory and the well, and between them was a large group of rhubarb bushes which grew every year and were enormous, and that was the wine. She made sloes wine from sloes that she gathered from the hedges. She made rhubarb wine, potato wine, practically anything that she grew in the garden she could turn into wine.
What did she have? Did she have demijohns, or did she have stone jars, or what did she?
Bottles, lots and lots of bottles, and she filled them in the bottles, and you had to be careful about how tight you corked them, because as they fermented, the corks blew off, and then after a certain amount of time, it was fit to drink. I think she used to filter it, but I'm not so sure about that. But there was this year's lot which you didn't drink, and last year's lot which you did.
And some people like Uncle Arthur were a bit more sort of cavalier with that rule.
Well, Uncle Arthur would sneak down in the night when he was staying there on holiday and collect the nearest bottle and get it down him, which often meant they found him in the morning lying on the floor because he was drinking this year's instead of last year's. But I think he mainly drank it because they told him he shouldn't.
Yeah. Sorry, but the dog's standing in the way. Okay. And did he ever, cause any of the bottles to sort of pop up open in the late at night?
Well, I don't think so. I don't know. You see, a lot of what I know about Uncle Arthur and Aunt Rosa and Victor and Jean being down there was just tales, because we weren't all down there at the same time, because the cottage wasn't big enough to contain us. So we would take turns in going and visiting Grandma.
You did actually live with Rosa and Victor, didn't you, at one stage?
We had a very large house in Knowles Road in West Norwood, London, which my Aunt Rosa and them had the upstairs, and we had the downstairs.
And did they move in after your dad died, or when?
No, we all moved in at the same time. We decided, because it sounds weird now, but they lived in rented houses, rented flats, and we were always, it seemed to me, it's not true, but it seemed as though we were always moving because they'd found a better rented flat to live in. And they found this house in Knowles Road, 100 Knowles Road. And
This dog's got asthma.
they lived in 100 Knowles Road, and they had the upstairs, we had the downstairs, and we lived there until during the war. We lived there for quite a few years.
But you differentiate between Knowles Road and the places that you rented. Surely you rented Knowles Road as well, didn't you?
Yes, we did rent Knowles Road, but it was a joint enterprise, you see. It was the two families rented the house.
So what you're saying is that previously you kind of rented rooms in a house. Knowles Road, you got the whole house.
Yeah. Yeah, when we lived in, before that we lived in 59 Lansdowne Hill, and the owner of the house lived in the downstairs. We had the upstairs flat, the upstairs half.
Right.